The math said he should be dead. By the end of the day, history said otherwise. January 26, 1945. Eastern France. Near the village of Holtzwihr. Morning arrived without warmth. The ground was frozen hard, layered with old snow and churned mud. Trees stood black and splintered from artillery. Smoke clung low to the earth, trapped by cold air. The men of the 3rd Infantry Division had been fighting without pause since landing in southern France months earlier. Now they were pushing through the Alsace region, one of the coldest campaigns of the European winter. Rations were thin, sleep came in fragments, boots stayed wet for days. At the forward edge of a shallow defensive position, Audie Murphy, 19 years old, checked his weapon. Murphy was small for a soldier, barely 5'5", weighing just over 110 pounds. But by this point in the war, size had long ceased to matter. He was already one of the most decorated soldiers in his division. He carried an M1 carbines, 15-round magazines, light, reliable, limited stopping power at range. Around him, his company braced for what intelligence had warned was coming, a German counterattack designed to punch a hole through Allied lines. Across the open fields, unseen behind mist and trees, German units assembled. Infantry, armored support, mortars already zeroed. At approximately 1400 hours, the first shells landed. Short bursts of artillery, range findings. Then the real barrage began. Explosions ripped across the American positions. Snow and dirt erupted into the air, shrapnel tore through branches, gear, flesh, radios fell silent, orders were drowned by concussions. Men pressed into frozen earth, waiting for the next impact. Murphy counted seconds between blasts. Not out of calm, but necessity. When the shelling lifted, the silence lasted only moments. Then came the sound every infantryman recognized. Engines. German armor rolled forward through the haze, followed by advancing infantry. Murphy's company faced a force larger than their reduced defensive line could withstand. Many riflemen were already casualties. Communications were fractured. Ammunition stocks were low after weeks of attritional fighting. Machine guns opened. American Browning M1919s answered from foxholes. German MG42s returned fire, faster, louder, with a cyclic rate approaching 1,200 rounds per minute. The field between the two forces became a corridor of tracers. Murphy moved along the line, shouting corrections, redistributing ammunition, directing fire. He was officially a platoon leader. Functionally, he was becoming something else. The German attack pressed closer. Tanks advanced deliberately, their treads crushing frozen ground. Infantry followed in disciplined bounds, using shell craters and smoke for cover. Murphy saw what his men saw. Too many. Too close. An American M10 tank destroyer behind the line took a direct hit. The vehicle burned almost instantly. Crew members scrambled out, some fell before reaching cover. Flames climbed higher, black smoke punching into the sky. Murphy made a decision. He ordered his remaining men to withdraw to secondary positions inside the woods. It was not a retreat. It was survival. As his soldiers pulled back, Murphy remained near the disabled M10. German infantry continued advancing. Murphy climbed onto the burning tank destroyer. Heat blasted through his gloves. Ammunition inside the hull began cooking off, rounds detonating unpredictably under the armor plating. Mounted on the M10 was a .50 caliber M2 Browning machine gun. Air-cooled, belt-fed, effective range well beyond infantry rifles. Murphy gripped the weapons. He was alone in the open ground. No supporting riflemen. No immediate covers. Only smoke, fire, noise. He fired. The M2's heavy recoil drove into his shoulder. Each burst cut through the advancing German formation. The .50 caliber rounds tore through snowbanks, equipment, bodies. German troops scattered, seeking concealment. Murphy continued firing. Short bursts. Controlled. He knew the gun's limits. He knew the ammunition belt would not last forever. The return fire intensified. Bullets struck the M10's metal surfaces with sharp, ringing impacts. Splinters of steel and debris ripped into Murphy's uniform. A round tore through his leg. He did not stop. German units attempted to flank. Murphy shifted aim, sweeping the machine gun across the field, forcing attackers back into cover. Tanks adjusted position, their turrets turning toward the burning vehicle. Murphy could see them now through thinning smoke. Distance closing. He reached for the field radio. Static. Broken transmissions. He called artillery coordinates anyway. Behind him, American guns recalculated. Seconds stretched. Murphy kept firing. German infantry tried again to advance under armored protection. The M2 answered. Then, finally, American artillery landed. Shells exploded among the German assault elements, breaking momentum, forcing temporary withdrawal. Murphy's ammunition belt neared empty. Smoke thickened. Pain surged through his wounded leg. Only then did he disengage. He slid from the burning M10, limping toward the tree line, weapon still in hand. Behind him, the German attack stalled. Ahead of him, his surviving soldiers regrouped. The battle for Holtzwihr was not over. But something irreversible had happened on that frozen field. A single wounded infantry officer had held a collapsing line long enough to change the course of the engagement. And the day was still far from finished. The cold bit deeper inside the woods. Murphy stumbled through crusted snow, each step driving pain through his wounded leg. Blood soaked into the fabric of his trousers, dark against white ground. Behind him, the disabled M10 tank destroyer continued to burn, a column of smoke marking the place where he had stood alone. Around him, fragments of his company reassembled. Men breathing hard. Faces gray with shock. Weapons checked by touch. No one asked questions, they had seen enough. German artillery resumed within minutes. Shells cracked through treetops, shredding branches into lethal splinters. The forest offered concealment but little protection. Explosions collapsed shallow fighting positions, forcing soldiers to dig again with frozen fingers. Murphy dropped beside a cluster of riflemen. He did not lie down. He began issuing orders. Fields of fire were reassigned, ammunition redistributed, remaining automatic weapons positioned to cover likely approaches from the open ground they had just abandoned. The company's strength had been cut sharply. Many were dead. Many were wounded. Some are missing. Murphy's radio operator had been killed earlier in the barrage. The handset now passed between soldiers as communications flickered. Across the field, German units reorganized. The artillery preparation had shifted, shorter, more precise. Tanks moved again. Observers later estimated the attacking force at roughly 2 companies of infantry supported by 6 tanks. Elements of the 2nd Battalion, 15th Infantry Regiment faced an assault designed to rupture the American line and retake ground near Holtzwihr. Engines growled through drifting smoke. Murphy raised binoculars. German armor advanced cautiously now, aware of the artillery response that had disrupted their first push. Infantry followed in staggered formation, using the burned wrecks and shell holes for cover. Murphy's men opened fire. M1 Garands cracked in measured rhythm. 8-round and block clips. The sharp metallic ping of empty clips echoed between bursts. German MG-42s answered again, long ripping streams of fire cutting through trees, chewing bark, snapping limbs. Murphy shifted along the line despite his injury. He moved low, fast, relentless. At one position, a machine gun crew struggled with a jammed Browning automatic rifle. Murphy dropped beside them, cleared the stoppage, slammed the bolt forward and pushed the weapon back into action. At another, a rifleman stared blankly, hands shaking uncontrollably. Murphy grabbed his shoulder. Spoke directly. Firm, immediate. The soldier returned to firing. German tanks began probing with high-explosive rounds. Shells detonated among the trees, collapsing cover, throwing men sideways. The concussion in the confined woodland was worse than in open ground, pressure waves rebounding off trunks and frozen earth. Murphy's leg trembled. He ignored it. A German infantry element began advancing along a shallow depression toward the American flank. Murphy spotted the movement. He crawled toward a forward firing point, dragging himself the final meters. Snow packed into his sleeves. The pain sharpened, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. He fired his M1 carbine. 15 rounds. Quick, controlled. German soldiers fell back into the depression. Murphy reloaded. Magazine empty. He reached for another. One left. Ammunition discipline became survival. Every burst measured, every shot is deliberate. German pressure increased. Their infantry closed distance, using tank fire for suppression. Mortar rounds began landing deeper inside the woods, walking forward toward Murphy's positions. Fragments of the company's defensive perimeter began bending inward. Murphy understood the pattern. The Germans were attempting to compress the line, isolate pockets, break cohesion. He called again for artillery. Coordinates corrected. Voice steady. Behind the front, American guns responded. Delayed, then violent. Shells crashed into advancing German formations, forcing temporary disarray. Snow geysered upward, infantry scattered, tanks adjusted position. But the German attack did not collapse. It adapted. Armor shifted to new angles. Infantry resumed movement through alternate cover. Murphy's men were nearing exhaustion. Hours without rest. Continuous adrenaline. Cold, penetrating bones. A medic worked frantically behind the line, bandaging wounds with stiffened gauze, administering morphine sparingly. Supplies were limited. Decisions are harsh. Murphy refused evacuation. His wound bled steadily. His face was pale. He remained upright. At approximately 1500 hours, German forces pushed closer than before. Small arms fire intensified. Grenades began landing among forward positions. Murphy seized a fallen soldier's Thompson submachine gun. .45 caliber. 20-round magazine. He leaned into a shallow rise and fired short bursts at advancing figures weaving between trees. The Thompson bucked heavily. The recoil is different from the carbines, slower, heavier, brutal at close range. German infantry hesitated. Not stopped. Murphy shifted again. Pain is constant now. Movement slower. A German tank's cannon fired directly into the tree line. The shell detonated meters away. Murphy was thrown sideways. Snow filled his mouth, ears ringing, vision blurred. He forced himself up. Around him, soldiers fought in fragmented pockets, small groups firing independently as the defensive line stretched thin. Murphy began consolidating. He pulled isolated riflemen back into stronger clusters, re-established overlapping fire, directed men to concentrate on exposed German infantry rather than armor they could not effectively penetrate. Cause and effect. Infantry suppressed tanks vulnerable. Tanks unsupported right arrow advance slows. The battle narrowed to brutal proximity. Shots at 30 yards. 20. 10. Voices shouted in German and English. Murphy fired until the Thompson ran dry. Reloaded. Magazine empty again. He dropped the weapon, returned to his carbine. The sky dimmed slightly as afternoon slid toward evening. Light fading. Temperature dropping further. German units prepared for another coordinated push. Murphy could see movement forming beyond the trees. He steadied himself against a trunk. Breathing hard. The next phase would decide whether the American position held or disappeared under steel and infantry. And the Germans were not finished yet. Late afternoons. January light thinnings. Visibility unstable. The forest line flickered with muzzle flashes. German infantry regrouped under cover of drifting smoke and broken terrain. Their tanks, still operational, adjusted formation. Turrets rotated slowly, deliberately, searching for movement inside the woods. Murphy watched through binoculars, breath fogging the lenses. He counted again. Infantry elements. Tank spacing. Direction of advance. Not out of curiosity but calculation. His company's defensive geometry was fractured. What had been a coherent line that morning was now a patchwork of small fighting positions tied together by shouted commands and instinct. Ammunition levels were critical. Riflemen checked bandoliers. Machine gun crews counted belts. Grenades were rationed. Murphy moved along the interior of the position, limping but unbroken. He reassigned sectors of fire to compensate for casualties. A two-man foxhole became a four-man strongpoint. A silent machine gun nest was replaced by riflemen firing in rotation to avoid overheating barrels. German mortars resumed. High arcs. Short travel time. Explosions burst among the trees, showering splinters that cut through uniforms like knives. The wounded multiplied. The medic's workload became impossible. Murphy dropped beside a radio man. Artillery immediate. Coordinates transmitted. Behind the lines, American batteries recalibrated under pressure. The winter air carried the distant thunder of outgoing shells. Seconds later, impact. Rounds detonated in staggered sequence across German assembly points. Infantry scattered again. A tank reversed abruptly, nearly colliding with another vehicle. Murphy used the disruption. He ordered concentrated fire on exposed infantry attempting to reform after the barrage. Garand's cracked in a disciplined rhythm. The remaining Browning automatic rifle hammered short bursts. German return fire intensified. MG-42 tracers sliced horizontally through the woods. Tank cannons fired high-explosive rounds directly into suspected firing positions, collapsing snowbanks and shredding cover. The engagement compressed. Distances shortened. Reactions sharpened. Murphy's leg weakened. Blood loss. Cold. Continuous exertion. He ignored the tremor and continued moving. A German infantry squad penetrated a shallow gap between two American clusters. Murphy reacted instantly. He grabbed two riflemen, shifted them 10 yards left, and created an overlapping crossfire. The German advance halted, then collapsed under converging shots. Cause and effect. Gap-sealed penetration fails. Penetration fails, momentum slows. But the Germans adapted again. Tanks moved forward in bounding support, using their armor to shield infantry. Machine guns mounted on the vehicles raked the treeline, suppressing defenders while soldiers advanced behind steel hulls. Murphy understood the danger. Infantry protected by armor right arrow defensive fire reduced. Defensive fire reduced right arrow close assault possible. He searched for anti-tank capability. Limited. A single bazooka team remained operational. Murphy crawled to their position. He pointed. Directed. The rocket launcher fired. Backblast scorched snow behind the tube. The shape charge rocket streaked forward and struck a German tank's side armor. Impact. Flash. The vehicle halted, smoke pouring from the breach. German infantry scattered from its cover. Murphy ordered immediate suppression fire into the disorganized soldiers. Rifles answered. The destroyed tank became both an obstacle and warning. Still, the attack continued. German commanders committed additional infantry to maintain pressure. The Americans, exhausted and reduced, fought now in cycles of adrenaline and near collapse. Murphy's voice cut through the chaos. Short commands. Clear. Unemotional. He redistributed ammunition from fallen soldiers, shifted weapons where resistance was weakest, maintained artillery contact whenever the radio functioned. Time blurred. Minutes indistinguishable from hours. The forest darkened further. Temperature falling rapidly toward night. German forces prepared for what appeared to be a final coordinated push. Armor and infantry aligned for maximum shock effect before full darkness. Murphy steadied himself. Breathing hard. Vision narrowing. He could feel the limits of his body approaching. The next decision would determine everything. Hold, or be overrun. And hesitation was no longer an option. Tanks advanced first, engines roaring, cannons firing into the woods. High-explosive shells detonated along the American line, collapsing cover and disorienting defenders. Infantry followed close behind. Fast, aggressive. Murphy saw the pattern immediately. This was not probing fire. This was commitment. He seized the radio handset. Called artillery again. Coordinates adjusted dangerously close to his own position. Risk calculated. Rounds landed within lethal distance of both forces. Explosions tore through advancing German formations. Infantry faltered. One tank veered sharply, tracks damaged by near impact. Murphy stood. Despite the wound. Despite exhaustion. He rallied the remaining defenders, ordered a counterattack, not broad, not reckless, localized, focused. American soldiers surged forward from the tree line in small groups, firing and advancing through smoke and debris. The sudden aggression shocked German infantry already destabilized by artillery. Murphy moved with them, limping, weapon raised. Short bursts from his carbine cut into retreating enemy elements. Riflemen followed, pressing pressure onto a force that had expected collapse, not advance. German momentum broke, then reversed. Infantry withdrew first. Tanks followed, covering the retreat with machine gun fire but abandoning the immediate objective. The field fell into uneasy silence. Smoke drifting, snow settling. Murphy's company held. Barely. When the firing stopped, the cost became visible. Dead and wounded lay across both forest edge and open ground. Medics moved carefully, prioritizing survivable injuries. Evacuation teams advanced under fatting light. Murphy finally allowed treatment. His leg wound was severe but not immediately fatal. He had remained in combat for over an hour after being hit. Exhaustion replaced adrenaline. Hands shaking now. Face drained. Around him, soldiers spoke quietly, voices edged with disbelief. They had not been overruns. Against numbers. Against armor. Because one officer had refused to yield ground at the critical moment. For his actions near Holtzwihr, France, on January 26, 1945, Audie Murphy received the Medal of Honor. Citation language was precise. He had held off an attack by infantry and tanks, killed and wounded numerous enemy soldiers, directed artillery under direct fire, rallied and led a counterattack despite injury. Murphy survived the war. He returned home as the most decorated American combat soldier of World War II. But the battlefield left its marks. Sleep was fractured. Memories persistent. His story became both legend and case study, not of invincibility, but of endurance under impossible pressure. Holtzwihr remains a place on a map. Frozen fields. Quiet woods. Yet on that January day in 1945, mathematics, 132 versus 1, failed to predict the outcome. Because war is not decided by numbers alone. It is decided in moments. Under fires. Under fear. Under choice.